Let's go to London. Journalist Veronica Pedrosa joins us. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Hi, Francois.
What is the secret of Rodrigo Duterte's success when you look at the early returns from these midterms?
I think people think that he is one of them. He's one of the people. He rose from being the mayor of a big provincial town in the south called Davao and worked his way up in the patronage system. As a matter of fact, he rose to power under the patronage of the former dictator, Ferdinand Marcos. And you'll notice that Ferdinand Marcos's daughter is running on Duterte's slate in the Senate. It's a very clannish, patronage-style politics that we have in the Philippines. And I think that this is part of the secret of Rodrigo Duterte. He speaks to Filipinos as one of them, someone who understands the system in which they work, its limits and its advantages. And people love it that he is as brash as he is, although from outside, we listen to him make jokes about rape, boasting that he himself has actually killed someone, and wonder how on earth this man could possibly be the leader. But I think it's one of those cases in which you have to look at a situation in terms of its geography and history and look a little bit deeper than the superficial surface, as it were.
Yeah, and we saw in that report that he might have the possibility now to change the Constitution. What's next?
The most important thing that he seems to want to change is the system of government from being sort of unitary to federalist. A system of federalism, decentralizing power, which makes sense given that he comes from the provinces himself. He is not one of the elite of Manila, the capital. And that is something that a lot of people feel strongly about. On the other hand, because of the experience under the former dictator Marcos, the Philippines was under martial law from 1972 to 1980. And that experience has meant that as soon as anyone speaks about changing the Constitution, people fear martial law. People fear authoritarianism. And one can't really blame them, given the style of leadership that Duterte has used in his first 3 years in office. But that's the most interesting, I think, aspect of this election. I know everyone wants to sort of characterize it as a barometer of of Duterte's popularity, but that is pretty much in the bag. I mean, he is enjoying 79% popularity, according to polls. His slate is going to be ushered in without a problem, as we'll see in results later on tonight or over the weekend. What is important is that this gives him the ability to change actual systems and structures of government and of the political system in the Philippines, and it will be very hard to come back from that.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that this, in effect, was a referendum on federalism?
No, not at all. I think that people were voting very much on local issues. Listen, as you just said, it's an archipelago of more than 7,000 islands. Each within that massive geographical space, there are more than 100 million people living. There are 62 million people who are registered to vote. There are 18,000 positions up for grabs. Every single one of those voters has got a different set of issues in their mind, be it the state of the roads in their place of work, be it the fact that they are recipients, for example, of one of the biggest social safety net projects in the world that is actually in place in the Philippines and is seen as a very successful part of social welfare policies that have been put in place by Duterte, but which have not got much international attention. So all of those people with all those different ideas are going to be voting not necessarily on Duterte's record. Another issue, which I'd like to bring up, if you don't mind, if there's time, is that of peace. Despite the fact that Duterte is seen as a very violent figure, as someone who incites violence, who has seen a massive uptick in violence through the war on drugs, the actual war that has been going on since the 70s in the south for a Muslim homeland by Muslim insurgents has reached a settlement during his time. There are two rival armed Muslim groups. They are talking to each other. There is a basic law in place whereby Muslim leaders feel that they are able to have a real say in their future. And that is something that I just like to place as a contrast to present a sort of more nuanced view of what's going on in the Philippines.
Yeah, and just one final question for you, Veronica. It's now nearly 2 years into his 6-year term. Which way has he gone? Because we were all wondering when he was elected, when it comes to the standoff between regional powers, U.S. and China.
He's very much seen as a sympathizer with China, and he's been extremely rude, using swear words and rude names for President Obama, for example. Just recently, he also had a go at Western powers for criticizing the East, as it were, or the South, developing countries for their human rights record via the situation of the Rohingya in Bangladesh, saying, well, if the West is so worried about human rights, why aren't they taking them in? We'll take them in the Philippines, he said. So he is somewhat disdainful of human rights as a sort of colonizing concept, which it would not be the case. Human rights analysts would say, you know, it doesn't matter where you're from. Human rights are universal to everyone in the world. Everyone has a right to human rights.
Veronica Pedrosa, many thanks for speaking with us from London.